She lent money to a man for coffee, never imagining he was a billionaire who would repay her in an unexpected way. That is what the headline would have read if Michelle Harris's life were a clickbait article. But as she stood in line at Perkins Coffee, a local café in downtown Minneapolis, she wasn't thinking about headlines. She was thinking about making it to work on time. The man in front of her patted his pockets with increasing desperation, his broad shoulders slumping in defeat as he turned to the barista with an apologetic smile. "I'm sorry. I seem to have forgotten my wallet." Michelle glanced at her watch. 8 minutes until her meeting. The barista's face hardened with the practiced patience of someone who heard every excuse. The line behind them grew restless. "I've got it," Michelle heard herself say, stepping forward and placing a $10 bill on the counter. "Add his order to mine." The stranger turned, and Michelle found herself looking into the most startling blue eyes she had ever seen. They crinkled at the corners as he smiled, a smile that seemed to transform his entire face. "That is incredibly kind of you," he said, his voice warm and deep. "And I promise I'll pay you back." Michelle waved away his promise. Pay it forward instead. She'd never see this man again anyway. As the barista handed them their drinks, the stranger asked, "Could I at least know the name of my caffeine?" "I'm very godmother," she laughed despite herself. Michelle Harris." "Paul Wright," he replied, extending his hand. As their fingers touched, Michelle felt an unexpected jolt that had nothing to do with the static electricity in the dry Minnesota winter air. "I really will find a way to thank you properly, Michelle Harris." "Not necessary," she insisted, already backing toward the door. "Enjoy your coffee." She hurried out, the cold March wind stealing her breath as she rushed down the street. What she didn't see was Paul watching her go, his expression thoughtful as he pulled out the phone he claimed not to have, dialing his assistant. "Lucy, I need you to find information on someone," he said quietly. "Michelle Harris, Minneapolis area." 3 weeks later, Michelle had forgotten all about the handsome stranger and his forgotten wallet. Life had moved on with its usual rhythms, demanding work days at the environmental non-profit where she served as community outreach coordinator. Evenings spent in the small apartment she shared with her younger sister Jenny, who was finishing her nursing degree. Have you signed up for that guided nature walk yet?" Jenny asked over breakfast, scrolling through her phone. "The one I told you about at Cedar Lake?" Michelle groaned. "You're still on that? I don't need organized activities to meet people." "When was the last time you went on a date?" Jenny challenged. "I don't have time for dating," Michelle countered, though the memory of striking blue eyes flashed unexpectedly through her mind. "Exactly," Jenny said triumphantly. "That is why I've already signed you up. It is this Saturday. Reconnect with nature and maybe someone special. Their words, not mine." Michelle rolled her eyes but secretly smiled. Her sister's persistence was both annoying and endearing. What harm could a nature walk do? At the very least, it would get her outdoors after a long winter of hibernation. Saturday dawned crisp and bright, one of those perfect early spring days that hinted at warmth to come. Michelle dressed in layers, preparing for Minnesota's notoriously fickle spring weather. She arrived at Cedar Lake 15 minutes early, a habit she couldn't shake despite Jenny's constant teasing about her punctuality. The small gathering area was already filling with people, most dressed in similar practical outdoor wear. The guide, a cheerful woman with a grey braid and deeply tanned skin, checked names off a clipboard. "Harris," she confirmed when Michelle approached. "That is me." "Great. We are just waiting for a few more. Oh, here comes one now." The guide waved to someone behind Michelle. "Sorry I am late," came a familiar voice that sent an unexpected shiver down Michelle's spine. "Had to drop my sons off with their grandmother." Michelle turned slowly, already knowing who she would see. Paul Wright stood before her, more casually dressed than at the coffee shop, but unmistakable with those blue eyes and that smile that seemed to appear the instant he recognized her. "A coffee fairy godmother," he said, his smile widening. "What an unexpected pleasure." Michelle S. Hart performed an inexplicable gymnastics routine. "You not following me, are you?" she asked, half joking, half suspicious. Paul laughed, a rich sound that drew glances from others in the group. "I signed up for this weeks ago. My son's therapist suggested more outdoor activities." He leaned closer, his voice dropping. "But if I had known you'd be here, I might have arrived on time." Before Michelle could respond, the guide called the group to attention, and they set off along the trail. As they walked, Paul fell into step beside her. "So," he said casually, "do you typically spend your weekends identifying native plant species?" Only when my sister signs me up without permission," Michelle replied, surprising herself with how easily conversation flowed. "She thinks I work too much." "Do you?" "Probably," she admitted. "But it matters, you know. I coordinate community outreach for the Minnesota Environmental Coalition. Every program we implement, every person we educate, makes a difference." Paul nodded, his expression suddenly thoughtful. "I understand that feeling of responsibility." As they hiked deeper into the reserve, Michelle found herself enchanted, not just by the awakening spring landscape, but by her unexpected companion. Paul listened intently as she pointed out early wildflowers poking through the leaf litter. He asked intelligent questions about her work, showing genuine interest rather than polite conversation. "Now what about you?" Michelle eventually asked as they paused by a small stream. "What do you do when you're not forgetting your wallet at coffee shops?" A curious expression flickered across Paula's face, something almost like hesitation. "Oh, I work in agricultural business," he said simply. "Primarily grain." "Like farming?" Michelle asked, picturing him on a tractor. Paul's laugh held a note of something she couldn't quite identify. "More on the business side. Import, export, that sort of thing." "Ooh." The guide called them forward to observe a woodpecker at work, interrupting further questions. Throughout the remainder of the hike, Michelle caught Paul watching her with an intensity that both thrilled and unnerved her. When they reached the end of the trail, he seemed ready to say something important, but his phone rang. "I am sorry," he said, checking the screen. "I have to take this. It's about my boys." He stepped away, speaking in low tones. The guide was distributing cards for discounted return visits when Paul rejoined the group. His expression had shifted, a new tension visible in his shoulders. "Everything okay?" Michelle asked. "Minor emergency," he explained. "My younger son's pet rabbit escaped its hutch, and apparently the entire household is in chaos." Michelle couldn't help but smile at the mental image. "A rabbit crisis, huh? Arthur is a very important family member," Paul said with mock seriousness, though his eyes sparkled with humor. "I'm afraid I need to go save the day." Michelle told herself the disappointment she felt was ridiculous. They'd just met, twice, technically, and she barely knew this man. "But," Paul continued, pulling out his phone, "I'd really like to see you again, Michelle. Properly this time. No coffee emergencies or rabbit jailbreaks." Michelle hesitated only briefly before taking his phone and entering her number. As she handed it back, their fingers brushed, and that same electric feeling returned. "I should call you," he promised, his voice soft but certain. Michelle watched him walk away, unable to explain the flutter in her chest or why she was already looking forward to his call. That evening, as she helped Jenny prepare dinner, Michelle found herself checking her phone far too frequently. "Earth to Michelle," Jenny teased, waving a wooden spoon in front of her face. "You've been distracted all evening. Did something interesting happen on your forced nature excursion?" Michelle debated deflecting, but knew her sister would see right through it. I met someone. Well, re-met someone. Jenny dropped her spoon with a clatter. Details, now. Just as Michelle opened her mouth to explain, her phone chimed with a text message. Both sisters lunged for it simultaneously, with Jenny emerging victorious. Michelle, it is Paul, Jenny read aloud dramatically. Thor has been rescued from behind the refrigerator, so the household crisis has been averted. I was wondering if you might be free for dinner tomorrow night. I still owe you for that coffee. Give me that! Michelle snatched the phone. Back, her cheeks warm. Who is Paul? Jenny demanded. And who is Thor? And why does he owe you for coffee? As Michelle explained their coffee shop meeting and today's coincidental reunion, she found herself smiling uncontrollably. The entire situation felt like something from one of the romance novels Jenny devoured. So are you going? Jenny asked when Michelle finished her story. Michelle looked down at the text, her finger hovering over the reply button. I barely know him. That's literally the point of a first date, Jenny countered, to get to know someone. It is not a date, Michelle protested weakly. He is just paying me back for coffee. Jenny's expression was comically skeptical. Right, and I am just studying to become a part-time nurse. Michelle texted back before she could overthink it. Dinner sounds great. Thor deserves a celebration for his daring escape. Paul's response came almost immediately. Thor agrees completely. Is 7 tomorrow okay? I'll pick you up. The next evening found Michelle changing outfits for the third time, while Jenny lounged on her bed, offering unhelpful commentary. The blue dress is perfect, Jenny insisted. It matches your eyes. It's too formal, Michelle argued, pulling it over her head and tossing it onto the growing pile. He just said dinner, not a gala. Where is he taking you? He didn't say. Michelle frowned, pulling out a simple black dress. This one? Jenny sighed dramatically. Fine, classic black it is, but wear the turquoise necklace to add some color. When the doorbell rang precisely at 7, Michelle nearly jumped out of her skin. Jenny raced to answer it before Michelle could stop. Her throwing open the door with an exaggerated hello. Paul stood in the hallway, looking unexpectedly nervous, wearing dark jeans and a navy blue button-down that made his eyes even more striking. He held a small bouquet of wildflowers that looked suspiciously like the ones they'd seen on yesterday's hike. You must be Jenny, he said, offering a warm smile. Michelle S. mentioned you. All good things, I hope, Jenny replied, stepping back to let him in. She's almost ready. Michelle emerged from her bedroom feeling oddly shy. Paul's expression when he saw her, a mixture of admiration and something deeper, made the hour of outfit changes worth it. You look beautiful, he said simply, offering the flowers. I hope these aren't too presumptuous. I remembered you pointing them out yesterday. And they'd be perfect, Michelle replied, taking the bouquet. Their fingertips brushed, and she wondered if she was imagining the way his breath caught slightly. As Paul drove them through the city in his surprisingly modest sedan, Michelle found herself relaxing. There was something comfortable about his presence, as if they'd known each other much longer than their brief encounters suggested. So where are we going? She asked finally, curiosity getting the better of her. Paul glanced over with a small smile. I hope you don't mind, but I thought we might avoid the typical restaurant scene. I know a place with the best view of the city and even better food. The place turned out to be the rooftop garden of a historic building overlooking the Minneapolis skyline. A small table had been set with linen and candles, and a chef stood nearby at a mobile cooking station. Paul, Michelle breathed, taking in the twinkling city lights below them. And how did you even arrange this? He shrugged, looking almost embarrassed. I know the building owner, it's nothing special. But it was special. The chef prepared each course in front of them, explaining the locally sourced ingredients, while Paul selected wines to pair with each dish. The conversation flowed easily, touching on everything from childhood memories to favorite books to their shared love of the outdoors. "Tell me about your sons," Michelle prompted as they lingered over dessert. "You mentioned them yesterday." Paul's face transformed, softening with obvious affection. "James is 12, going on 30, all serious thoughts and science experiments. Noah is 8, the owner of the infamous escape artist Thor, and believes firmly that vegetables are a government conspiracy." Michelle laughed. "They sound wonderful." "They are," Paul agreed, his expression growing more somber. "Their mother left when Noah was 3. It's been just the 3 of us since then, figuring things out together." "That can't have been easy," Michelle said softly. "It wasn't tea at first, but we've found our rhythm." He hesitated, then added, "They were everything to me. Any relationship I might have, they were part of the package." The implication hung in the air between them, that this might be more than a thank-you dinner, that there might be potential for something lasting. "I'd like to meet them someday," Michelle said, surprising herself with her boldness. Paul's smile was like sunrise. "I'd like that too." As the evening wound down, they stood at the rooftop edge, looking out over the city. Paul stood close enough that Michelle could feel the warmth radiating from him, their shoulders nearly touching. "Thank you for tonight," she said, "though I think you've more than repaid a $10 coffee debt." "Maybe I wanted an excuse to see you again," he admitted, turning to face her. The candlelight caught the angles of his face, highlighting the intensity in his eyes. "Michelle, I know we've only just met, but there is something about you that I can't quite explain." Michelle's heart raced as he leaned closer. "I feel it too," she whispered. His kiss was gentle at first, a question rather than a demand. When she responded, sliding her hands up to his shoulders, it deepened into something that left them both breathless. The weeks that followed passed in a whirlwind of stolen moments and increasingly frequent dates. Paul took her sailing on Lake Minnetonka to a hidden jazz club he loved, and for picnics in secluded parks. Michelle introduced him to her favorite bookstore café, the community garden where she volunteered, and the best ice cream shop in the city. What struck her most was his attentiveness, the way he remembered small details she mentioned, how he always asked about her day with genuine interest, the thoughtful texts that arrived just when she needed encouragement. Despite his obvious success in business, he never flaunted wealth or status. A month into their relationship, Paul invited Michelle to his home to meet his sons. She spent the entire morning in a state of nervous anticipation. "They children, not interview panels," Jenny reminded her as Michelle changed her outfit for the 4th time. "Children are worse than interview panels," Michelle countered. They honest. The drive to Paul's house took them out of the city to a wooded area near Lake Minnetonka. Michelle had expected something impressive, given Paul's evident success, but the colonial-style home nestled among oak trees was tasteful rather than ostentatious. Large but not overwhelming, elegant but clearly a family home with bicycles on the porch and a basketball hoop in the driveway. Paul met her at the door, kissing her lightly. "Ready to meet the chaos?" James, the older boy, greeted her with his father's reserve but genuine politeness. He had Paul's eyes and serious expression, offering a formal handshake that made Michelle smile. Noah was a whirlwind of energy and questions. "Did Dad tell you about Thor? Want to see him? Can you do a handstand? I can Dad can. Did you bring cookies? Dad said not to ask for cookies." "Noah," Paul warned gently. "Let Michelle breathe." "No, it is okay," Michelle laughed, kneeling to the boy's level. "Yes, I've heard all about Thor. I'd love to meet him. No, I can't do a handstand either. And yes, actually," she produced a small box from her bag. "I did bring cookies, homemade." Noah's eyes widened with delight. "Dad, she brought cookies and she wants to meet Thor. Can we keep her?" Paul's cheeks reddened, but his eyes met Michelle's with unmistakable warmth. "We'll see, buddy, we'll see." The afternoon unfolded with a casual lunch, a tour of the house, including Thor's elaborate hutch, and board games that became increasingly competitive between Paul and James. The family dynamic fascinated Michelle. The obvious love between father and sons, the inside jokes, the gentle discipline, the way Paul gave each boy his complete attention. Later, as the boys played video games, Paul joined Michelle on the back porch swing. "Verdict?" he asked, a hint of nervousness in his voice. "They amazing," she replied honestly. "You've done a wonderful job with them." He took her hand, his expression serious. "Their opinion matters to me. A lot." "And?" she prompted, suddenly anxious herself. Paul's smile was slow and sure. "James asked if you would help with his science project on local ecosystems, and Noah wants to know if you will come to his soccer game next weekend." A relief and happiness bubbled through her. I'd love to do both. As spring turned to summer, Michelle found herself spending more and more time at Paul's house. The boys quickly accepted her presence, and she discovered a talent for helping with homework, bandaging scraped knees, and mediating brotherly disputes. Thor even allowed her to hold him, which Noah declared was better than a royal blessing. Yet, despite the deepening intimacy of their relationship, Michelle sensed Paul was holding something back. He rarely discussed the details of his work beyond vague references to meetings and business trips. His home, while beautiful, contained few personal mementos or photographs, and occasionally she'd catch him watching her with an expression that seemed almost guilty. One evening, as they sat on his porch after the boys had gone to bed, stars twinkling overhead and the sounds of night creatures creating a gentle soundtrack, Michelle decided to broach the subject. "Paul," she began carefully, "I feel like there's something you're not telling me." His body tensed beside her, confirming her suspicion. "What do you mean? About your life, your work?" She turned to face him. "Sometimes I feel like I'm only seeing pieces of you." Paul was silent for so long that Michelle began to regret bringing it up. Finally he sighed, running a hand through his hair in a gesture she'd come to recognize as signaling his discomfort. "You are right," he admitted. "There are things I haven't told you, not because I wanted to deceive you, but because—" He paused, searching for words. "Because I was afraid it would change how you see me." Michelle's imagination conjured worst-case scenarios. "Are you married? In witness protection? Secretly a vampire?" The last suggestion succeeded in breaking the tension. Paul laughed, shaking his head. "Nothing that interesting, I promise." He took her hands in his. "The truth is, my company, Right Agricultural Enterprises, is a bit larger than I might have implied." How much larger?" Michelle asked, confused about why this would be a source of secrecy. "International. We're one of the largest grain exporters in the country." He hesitated again. "The Forbes list estimated my net worth at just over $2 billion last year." Michelle stared at him, waiting for the punchline. When none came, she pulled her hands back. "You were serious?" "Oh, yes. You are a billionaire." "Technically." Michelle stood abruptly, pacing the length of the porch as she processed this revelation. "That's why you never pay with a card. Why your house is so modest for the area. Why you never talk about your work in specifics." Paul watched her, his expression guarded. "After Caroline, my ex-wife, I became careful about who I let into my life. She married me when I was just starting out. When the business took off, everything changed. She changed, started caring more about status and appearances than our family. So you decided to what? Test me? See if I was a gold digger by pretending? To forget your wallet?" The hurt in her voice was unmistakable. Paul stood, reaching for her, but Michelle stepped back. "No, That day at the coffee shop was genuine. I really did forget my wallet. But afterward, he sighed. None afterward, I was intrigued by the woman who would help a stranger without hesitation and refuse repayment. When we met again on that hike, it felt like fate. The hike wasn't a coincidence either, was it? Michelle's voice had gone quiet. Paul at least had the grace to look ashamed. I may have donated to the nature reserve after learning you were registered for their event. And then what? You thought you'd date the ordinary girl for a while? See how the other half lives? Michelle, no. Paul stepped forward, his eyes pleading. What happened between us was real, is real. I wanted you to know me, not my bank account. When people find out who I am, they change. They want things from me. So instead you lied. I omitted, he corrected. Gently. Everything else. How I feel about you, my past, my boys, that's all true. Michelle wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold despite the warm evening. I need to go home. I need to think. Paul nodded, his expression resigned. I'll drive you. No, I'll call a car. She couldn't bear the thought of being confined with him right now, her emotions too raw. Michelle, Paul said as she gathered her purse, I'm sorry. I was going to tell you. I was just waiting for the right moment. She paused at the door. 3 months, Paul. We've been seeing each other for 3 months. There were plenty of right moments. The ride home was a blur of confused thoughts. Michelle replayed every interaction, every date, every conversation, looking for clues she missed. The modest car he drove, the way he sometimes seemed uncomfortable when she insisted on paying her share, the casual mentions of business associates who turned out to be world leaders and industry titans. Jenny was waiting up when Michelle arrived home, immediately sensing something was wrong. What happened? Did you and Paul fight? Michelle sank onto the couch. Paul Wright, as in Wright Agricultural Enterprises, as in one of the richest men in Minnesota. Jenny's eyes widened. Wait, your Paul is that Paul Wright? Apparently. Michelle buried her face in her hands. How did I not know? How did I date a billionaire for 3 months without realizing it? Because he drives a 5-year-old Volvo and wears the same 3 button-downs on rotation, Jenny pointed out pragmatically. Also because you never Google anyone, Michelle groaned. He should have told me. Yes, Jenny agreed. He should have. But I can kind of understand why he didn't. But whose side are you on? Yours, always. But think about it. The guy probably has people trying to use him for his money constantly. Then he meets you, who treats him like a normal person, and he gets to just be himself. Michelle hadn't. He considered that perspective. But he researched me. He manipulated circumstances so we'd meet again, which is definitely weird and a little stalkery, Jenny conceded, but also kind of romantic in a creepy rich person way. Despite everything, Michelle found herself smiling reluctantly. I am mad at him. You're allowed to be. But I also miss him already. Jenny patted her knee sympathetically. That's how you know it. It's real. The next morning, Michelle woke to a text from Paul. I understand if you need space. Just know that my feelings for you are the most honest thing in my life. She didn't reply. 3 days passed with no contact. Michelle threw herself into work, staying late at the office and volunteering for weekend events. Jenny watched with concern but didn't push. On the 4th day, Michelle arrived at her office to find James waiting in the reception area, a large binder clutched in his hands. James? She said, surprised. Does your dad know you here? The boy nodded, his expression serious. He dropped me off. I told him I needed to talk to you about my science project, but that's not exactly true. Michelle led him to her small office, curious despite herself. What's going on? James placed the binder on her desk. I made this for you. It is everything you should know about my dad. Inside were newspaper clippings, photographs, and handwritten notes. Articles about right agricultural sustainable farming initiatives. Photos of Paul with his sons at charity events. A feature on the scholarship program he established for rural students. Pages of James S. neat handwriting detailing Paul's favorite books, foods, and dad jokes. He's miserable without you, James said simply. Noah keeps asking when you were coming back, and Dad just looks sad and says, soon, even though he doesn't know if that is true. He thinks he ruined everything. Michelle's chest tightened. It is complicated, James. Adults always say that, the boy replied with surprising insight. But sometimes it is not. Sometimes you just have to decide if you love someone enough to forgive them. The question lingered in Michelle's mind all day. Did she love Paul? The answer came without hesitation. Yes. She loved his integrity, his devotion to his sons, his quiet strength, his surprising vulnerability. His wealth, or his concealment of it, did not change those fundamental truths about who he was. That evening she found herself driving to his house without consciously making the decision. The lights were on, warm squares of gold in the gathering dusk. She sat in her car for several minutes, gathering courage before walking to the door. Noah answered her knock, his face lighting up with joy. Michelle, Dad, Michelle is here. He flung himself at her, wrapping skinny arms around her waist. Paul appeared in the hallway, hope and uncertainty warring in his expression. Michelle, we need to talk, she said. Noah reluctantly released her at Paul's gentle instruction to go help James with dinner preparations. Paul led Michelle to the living room where they sat facing each other. I'm sorry, they both said simultaneously, then laughed nervously. Let me go first, Michelle requested. I overreacted. Yes, you should have told me sooner, but I understand why you didn't. It must be difficult to never know if people want you for yourself or for what you can give them. Paul nodded, relief evident in his posture. I handled it badly. I was afraid of losing you, and instead I nearly drove you away. He leaned forward, taking her hands. These past few days without you have been torture. The boys miss you. I miss you. This house isn't at home without you in it. James came to see me today, Michelle admitted. He brought a very thorough dossier on why you were worth forgiving. Paul groaned. That kid is too smart for his own good. He takes after his father. Michelle squeezed Paul's hands. No more secrets? No more secret, Paul promised. He hesitated, then reached into his pocket. Actually, there is one more thing I've been keeping from you. Michelle's breath caught as Paul pulled out a small velvet box. Paul, I am not proposing, he clarified quickly. Not yet, but I wanted you to have this. He opened the box to reveal a delicate silver pendant in the shape of a coffee cup. Michelle laughed, tears springing to her eyes. I had it made the week after we met, Paul explained. I knew even then that there was something special about you, about us. I've been carrying it around, waiting for the right moment. My dear's perfect, Michelle whispered as he fastened it around her neck. I love it, and I love you. The words slipped out naturally, as if she'd been saying them for years, rather than for the first time. Paul's eyes widened briefly before his face broke into a radiant smile. I love you too, he replied, pulling her into his arms. More than I ever thought possible. The sound of poorly suppressed giggles made them break apart. James and Noah stood in the doorway, watching with identical expressions of satisfaction. Does this mean Michelle's staying for dinner? Noah asked hopefully. Paul looked at her, eyebrows raised in question. That depends on Michelle. I'm staying, she confirmed, smiling as Noah whooped in celebration, but only if Thor is joining us. Thor always has dinner with us. Noah informed her seriously. He is family. As they moved to the dining room, Paul's arm warm around her waist, Michelle marveled at how completely her life had changed in the 3 months since she lent $10 to a stranger. The wealth revelation no longer seemed important. Paul was still Paul, the man who quoted poetry while making breakfast, who coached Little League on weekends, who kissed her like she was precious. Over the next few months, their relationship deepened and strengthened. Michelle began staying over regularly, finding space in Paul's closet and medicine cabinet. The boys adjusted to her presence with surprising ease, seeking her help with homework and including her in their private jokes. Paul took her to events and introduced her to his business associates, no longer hiding his professional life. Michelle found herself warming to this community service aspect of wealth. The foundations, the charitable initiatives, the opportunity to make meaningful change on a larger scale than she'd ever imagined. When Paul finally did propose, 6 months after their reconciliation, it wasn't with an ostentatious display of wealth or a grand gesture. Instead, it happened on a Tuesday evening at home, the 4 of them making pizza together, flour dusting the countertops, and laughter filling the kitchen. Paul dropped to one knee in the middle of an argument about whether pineapple belonged on pizza, a simple ring in his hand and love shining in his eyes. "Michelle Harris," he said, his voice steady and sure, "you've brought joy and light back into our lives. The boys and I can't imagine our family without you. Will you marry me?" James and Noah held their breath, watching anxiously. Thor, who had been let out of his hutch for the evening, seemed to pause in his explorations of the kitchen floor. Michelle looked at the 3 faces she'd come to love so dearly. "Yes," she answered, her heart overflowing. "Yes to all of you." The wedding was small and intimate, held in the garden behind their home, with only close friends and family in attendance. Jenny served as maid of honor, while James and Noah shared best man duties, and Thor, wearing a tiny bow tie, was the ring-bearer, carried down the aisle in a basket by a very serious Noah. As Paul slipped the wedding band onto her finger, Michelle reflected on the strange, wonderful journey that had led them here. From a chance encounter over forgotten coffee, money to finding her place in this ready-made family that now felt like her own. "I told you I'd pay you back," Paul whispered, as they shared their first dance as husband and wife. Michelle laughed, leaning her head against his chest. "This is a bit more than the $10 I lent you." "Best investment you ever made," he countered, spinning her gently under the twinkling lights. Looking up at the man she loved, surrounded by their family and friends, Michelle had to agree. Epilogue. 5 years later, Michelle sat on the porch swing, watching Paul chase their daughter Lily through the sprinkler, her delighted squeals mixing with Noah and James's laughter. Thor, now an elderly rabbit who had long since retired from escape attempts, dozed in his outdoor enclosure nearby. "Mum, watch me!" Noah called, executing a perfect cartwheel through the spray of water. "Very impressive," Michelle called back, adjusting the sleeping infant in her arms. Baby Thomas, just 3 months old, had his father's blue eyes and his mother's determination. James, now 17 and preparing for college, dropped onto the swing beside her. "Need me to take him so you can join the water fight?" Michelle smiled, passing the baby to his older brother. "Thanks, but I'm enjoying the view from here." The view was indeed perfect. Her family, happy and whole, playing in the golden afternoon light. Their path hadn't always been smooth. There had been adjustments on all sides. Michelle learning to navigate wealth and privilege without losing her values. Paul balancing his protective instincts with respect for her independence. The boys adapting to a new maternal figure and later to younger siblings. But through it all, they faced challenges together, their bond strengthening with each obstacle overcome. Paul caught her watching and blew her a kiss, his smile still capable of making her heart race after all these years. She blew one back, grateful for that long-ago moment when she'd reached for her wallet to help a handsome stranger. $10 had bought her a coffee and the love of her life, definitely the best deal she'd ever made.